His daughter vanishes during a trip to Paris, leaving a former agent with just 65 hours to find her. Following a trail of clues through the city's underworld, from a photo kiosk to a vicious trafficking network, he pushes his limits to infiltrate a dark auction where she's the final prize. With every second slipping away and deadly enemies closing in, he's locked in a race against time to bring her home. Today, we will be recapping the 2008 movie Taken. The movie opens with Brian, a father shopping for his 17-year-old daughter Kim's birthday, picks out a karaoke machine from an electronics store. When he arrives at Kim's home, her mother, Lenore, greets him coldly, criticizing his gift choice and questioning his presence. Despite this, Kim lights up when she sees the karaoke machine, though her excitement fades when her stepfather, Stuart, surprises her with an elegant horse. Later, back at his own place, Brian hosts a small gathering with 3 old friends, all retired agents. Over steaks, poker, and beer, one of them, Sam, suggests Brian join them for an easy gig, acting as security for a famous pop singer at a local concert. At the concert, Brian approaches Shira, the pop star. While Brian plays poker with his friends later, Kim calls, inviting him to lunch. Meanwhile, at the concert, a fan crowd suddenly overwhelms security. In the fray, Brian swiftly handles a knife-wielding attacker, protecting Shira. Grateful, Shira later thanks him and offers to help connect Kim with a vocal coach if she has any real talent. Brian is thrilled with Shira's offer for Kim, eager to share the news, but Lenore joins them for lunch. She asked him to sign a parental consent form, allowing Kim to travel to Paris with her friend Amanda. Brian hesitates, aware of the risks in certain parts of Paris and feeling Kim may be too young for such a trip. Kim reassures him that she'll be staying with Amanda's cousin and visiting museums, but when Brian says he'll think it over, she assumes he's saying no and becomes visibly upset. Lenore criticizes Brian for being overly protective, wanting Kim to experience life fully. The next day, Brian arrives at Stuart's house with the signed consent form, a prepaid international phone, and a few conditions. He insists on driving Kim to the airport, requires her to contact him upon arrival in Paris, and asks that she check in each night with the address and phone number of any new place she's staying. At the airport, as Brian unloads Kim's bags, he spots a map of Europe with several cities marked. Confronting Lenore, he learns that Kim and Amanda plan not only to stay in Paris, but also to follow U2 on a European tour. Though Brian is furious, it's too late to change anything. In Paris, while waiting for a cab, Kim and Amanda meet Peter, a young local who offers to share a ride downtown. Amanda eagerly accepts, and Kim reluctantly agrees. Acting like a gentleman, Peter has the girls get out of the cab first, then invites them to a party later. As he drives off, Peter discreetly makes a call saying, 2 girls, about 18, and provides the apartment address. Later, upstairs in the apartment, Kim asks where Amanda's cousins are, only to learn they're away in Spain. Amanda, undeterred, reveals her plan to hook up with Peter that night. Back in the US, Brian grows anxious when he sees that Kim's flight has landed. He tries calling her, but in the Paris apartment, Amanda has turned the music up so loud that neither she nor Kim hears the phone ringing. Eventually, Brian reaches Kim, who moves to a quieter area of the apartment to speak with him. While on the call, Kim looks across the courtyard and sees Amanda in another window. Suddenly, she watches in horror as 2 men grab Amanda and drag her out of sight. Panicked, Kim tells her father what's happening. Brian immediately takes charge, instructing Kim to hide under the bed in the nearest bedroom. He begins asking her precise questions to gather information. From her responses, he learns that Kim and Amanda had shared a cab with someone named Peter, and that there were likely 3 or 4 men involved in Amanda's abduction. Brian tells Kim to keep her phone on and use the next few seconds to describe any details she can about the kidnappers. He quickly connects his phone to an audio recorder to capture everything. As 2 men enter the bedroom, they seem confused, not realizing Kim is hiding. Speaking in a foreign language, they search the room while Brian instructs Kim to hold the phone toward them so he can listen. Relieved when they leave, Kim whispers this to her father, only to be suddenly yanked out from under the bed. Brian listens as she yells, then heavy breathing on the line. Calmly but firmly, Brian addresses the kidnapper, warning that if his daughter is freed, he will not pursue them. If not, however, he promises he will track them down and kill them, emphasizing his skills as a seasoned agent. The kidnapper replies, "Good luck." Brian immediately sends the recording to his old friend Sam from the agency for analysis. He then confronts Stuart, suspecting that one of Stuart's business rivals might have targeted Kim. However, once he rules out any link to Stuart's business, Brian searches Kim's room, hoping to find any leads. Lenore listens as Brian speaks to Sam on speakerphone. Sam provides a detailed report, identifying the language spoken by Kim's kidnappers as Albanian, with a specific regional accent. He explains that their leader, a powerful figure named Marco, likely organized the abduction. Sam warns Brian that he only has 96 hours to find Kim before she disappears into the Albanian human trafficking ring. Brian, determined to uncover every detail of Kim's abduction, continuously replays the audio of her kidnapping aboard a private jet, committing each sound to memory. His investigation begins in the Paris apartment of Amanda's relatives, where he finds Kim's damaged cell phone near the bed she hid under. Extracting the memory card, he pieces together the events, eventually tracking down a photo Peter took at the airport. At a photo kiosk, he magnifies the image, pinpointing Peter's reflection. At the airport, Brian spots Peter sharing a cab with a blonde woman and quickly confronts him, attempting to get information on Kim and Amanda. When Peter's massive partner intervenes, Brian engages in a fight, allowing Peter to make a getaway. Undeterred, Brian dispatches the partner and follows Peter in a commandeered taxi. The chase ends as Peter leaps into traffic, only to be struck fatally by a passing truck. Seeking help, Brian approaches an old friend, Jean-Claude, who reluctantly provides the whereabouts of Albanian traffickers connected to Kim's disappearance. He warns Brian to tread carefully and assigns agents to tail him. Brian then rents a car and meets with an interpreter to help him navigate Paris's Pigalle district. To bait a pimp, Brian hires an escort, feigning interest until the man arrives to confront him. Brian discreetly plants a listening device on the pimp, and back in the car, the interpreter translates the overheard Albanian conversations, revealing a new lead at a nearby construction site. After dismissing the interpreter, Brian heads to the location. At the construction site, a line of men waits to enter a trailer. Brian joins them, posing as a customer. Once inside, he is given a ticket and wanders through a maze of makeshift rooms separated by blankets. One by one, he checks each area, finally finding a woman who appears to have been sedated. While she's not Kim, her disoriented plea briefly diverts him. As Brian pushes further, he reaches the last room where he spots a woman with Kim's jacket and similar hair. Though it's not Kim, Brian takes the drugged woman with him, fleeing in a stolen Jeep amidst a flurry of angry pursuers. They escape to a secluded hotel where Brian rents 2 rooms. Brian sets up an IV and administers Narcan to rapidly flush drugs from the girl's system, helping her regain clarity. Later, he meets Jean-Claude by the river in an open area. Jean-Claude receives a call as he arrives, and Brian expresses his distrust. Jean-Claude explains that his boss was furious about the violent incident at the construction site and initially ordered Brian's arrest. However, Jean-Claude convinced his superior to provide Brian with a ticket back to the US instead, as a gesture for past services. Brian refuses. Just then, Brian realizes Jean-Claude's men are closing in, having tracked his phone. Calmly, Brian makes his escape. Once the girl is coherent, she tells Brian that another girl gave her Kim's jacket and vaguely recalls a house on Rue Paradis with red doors. Brian finds the red-doored building and, with Jean-Claude's business card as a ruse, enters confidently. Inside, he's escorted past several guards and brought to a room where 4 Albanians sit at a table. Each man claims to be Marco, and from the place Brian's interpreter had mentioned. Brian tells them their previous police contact, Mr. Macon, has been reassigned, and that he's there to handle future collections, which will come at a higher rate. Following some tense bargaining, Brian zeroes in on one man who seems to match the voice from Kim's phone. Before leaving, Brian produces a note and asks if anyone can translate it. The leader responds with the phrase, "Good luck," and Brian instantly recognizes his voice as Marco's. In an instant, Brian launches into action, battling and overpowering the armed men throughout the house. He eliminates everyone except Marco, whom he leaves alive temporarily. Searching the upper floors, he finds Amanda's lifeless body, another tragic victim of overdose. Using an electric shock, he tortures Marco for answers. Marco reveals that Kim was sold to a buyer named St. Clair. Brian coldly reactivates the electricity, leaving Marco to suffer as he departs. When Jean-Claude returns home for dinner, he's startled to find Brian waiting as if they were old friends. Isabelle, Jean-Claude's wife, asks him to put their children to bed, during which he retrieves a pistol from the bathroom and tucks it behind his belt. Back at the dining table, Brian makes small talk about moving to Paris, then casually brings up Macon's name and the address of the Albanian hideout. Isabelle, unaware of the tension, mentions that she knows Macon. Brian then confronts Jean-Claude, accusing him of selling protection to the Albanians and demanding to know who St. Clair is. Jean-Claude pulls his gun and launches into a tirade about the struggle between his expenses and his modest pay. In response, Brian tosses a few bullets on the table and points out that if Jean-Claude can't tell the difference in weight between a loaded and an empty gun, He's been behind a desk too long. Brian then shoots Isabelle in the arm, threatening that if Jean-Claude doesn't cooperate, the next shot won't spare her. Panicked, Jean-Claude complies, retrieving police records from his computer that provide details on St. Clair's location. After securing this information, Brian coldly advises Jean-Claude to apologize to his wife, then knocks him out with a pistol whip. Using Jean-Claude's identity as cover, Brian infiltrates a party hosted by St. Clair. He soon realizes that the event's true horror lies on a lower level, where an auction of young women is taking place. Disguised as a waiter, Brian slips into a darkened cubicle facing a stage behind glass, where drugged, barely clothed women are paraded for bidders. When it's Kim's turn, the auctioneer announces her as an American, the final and most valuable lot. In his cubicle, Brian draws a gun on a bidder, forcing him to place a winning bid for Kim at $500,000. However, as Brian attempts to leave with the buyer at gunpoint, he's struck from behind and blacks out. He awakens suspended from a pipe near the ceiling, with St. Clair standing nearby. Brian declares he's simply a father trying to save his daughter. Unfazed, St. Clair dismisses Brian's plea, calling it business, and orders his men to kill Brian silently before leaving the room. Despite being restrained, Brian manages to free himself and overpowers the guards, killing them in his escape. As Brian reaches the elevator, he encounters a shocked St. Clair. Trying to save himself, St. Clair insists that everything was just business, and reveals that Kim is being taken to a dock. Brian, unmoved, kills him before sending the elevator up to disrupt the party. Brian races to the riverbank, but he's too late to stop the large yacht carrying Kim and other veiled women as it drifts downstream. Acting quickly, he drives a stolen car the wrong way through traffic, positioning himself on the Pont des Arts bridge, where he leaps onto the moving yacht as it passes beneath. Once on board, Brian navigates through the security, pushing past guards until he reaches a bedroom where an Arab man is holding a knife to Kim's throat. A tense standoff ensues as Brian aims his gun, but without hesitation, he shoots the man just as he begins to speak, freeing Kim. Back in the US, Kim reunites with her mother, Lenore, who warmly thanks Brian with a hug. Later, Brian takes Kim to an upscale home and steps aside after knocking on the door. Inside, pop star Shira sits at a piano. Shira warmly greets Kim, who she's heard wants to be a singer, and encourages her, "Let's see what you've got." And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.